Welcome to The Business Strategist, the show for CEOs and founders ready to scale fast, lead smarter, and build a business that doesn't rely on them. I'm Adam Strong, award-winning strategist, former elite athlete, international speaker, and 3 times best-selling author. After 3 decades in business, I know exactly what it takes to grow, scale, and exit with impact. Each week, I dive into real conversations with industry experts, bold entrepreneurs, and clients navigating the uphill struggles of business, giving you the tools and the strategies to create more profit, more freedom, and more impact. Let's get into it. Hey guys, I just wanted to take this opportunity to make you aware of a brand new tool that we've just created called the Exit Readiness Assessment. Now, it is for founders and CEOs that are looking to exit from their business operations. Now, it doesn't matter even if you're not looking to exit right now, I would highly recommend to go and take the assessment straight away. It helps you to identify areas in your business that you need to work on to help you towards that exit strategy. And at the end of it, you get a personalized report on some of the areas that you're doing particularly well in and some of the areas that you need to make some improvements to. Make sure you head over to readytoexit.scoreapp.com. That's readytoexit.scoreapp.com. Enjoy. If the economy is so bad, how come some founders are having some of the best years of their life while everyone else is clinging on? Same headlines, high inflation, and there's a huge amount of uncertainty in the world right now. Yet most businesses are cutting back. But there's a small group of people out there. There is a small group of businesses out there that are using this exact moment, this exact economy, if you want to call it that, to grab market share and pull away from the pack. So the real question is, ladies and gents, is how bad really is the economy? And what are the winning few are doing completely different? That's what we're going to be talking about today. Now, my guest today is an amazing lady called Dr. Rebecca Homkes, and she's a high growth specialist. She lectures at London Business School, and she has advised leaders that's from scale up to global giants on how to grow in volatile times, economic uncertainty, and has created various different strategies. She's also a best-selling author. She's got a book called Survive, Reset, and Thrive, which we're going to talk a little bit about today, of course. Now, I want to kind of give context for you guys that are listening in. First of all, this episode is not doom and gloom. I don't do doom and gloom, right? It's about how to steady your ship, reset a strategy, then thrive even when the economy is going through massive turmoil. Okay. So I really kind of want to put that into context for today. Anyway, without further ado, Rebecca, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Adam. It's my pleasure to be here.
Great for you to be here. You know, it's really interesting because I think we spoke a few weeks ago, and how we had never crossed our paths before is completely, I don't know, how is that even possible? We have our really good friend, Gary Ridge, previous CEO of WD-40, which we've had on the show previously. We've had Marshall Goldsmith here on the show. And I met up with Morag Barat actually just a few weeks ago in London. So I don't know, how is that even possible?
We're not even 7 degrees. We're about half a degree of separation in 7 different ways. So we must have crossed paths at some point in London, but yeah.
100%. Well, listen, it's great to have you here. And I'm really looking forward to our thought-provoking conversations and stuff like that. Things I know about you is that you've been on the big sort of American media, NBC, CNBC, and you know what those media are like. They're like, so tell me, how bad is really the economy? But for you guys, like I said, for context, I really wanted to bring her on today because I feel like, and I don't know about you, but I also am feeling a little bit cautious. And in fact, I probably predicted this about 12 months ago, Rebecca, with regards to this kind of level of uncertainty as the world's going through a very funny phase, as I like to call it. Wouldn't you agree on that?
Yeah, funny is a good word. Cautious is a good word. You know, all the macro data points are pointing to everyone's just a little uneasy. Customers, consumers, businesses, government officials, right? So we're not in a downturn. There's very few predictions of a downturn, but everyone's just a little on the edge of their seats.
Yeah. And I absolutely agree. And it doesn't matter where you are in the world, by the way, whether you're listening to us in Timbuktu, in Australia, the United States, whatever it is, you probably are all feeling exactly the same. So let's jump in today, because I know that we've got a lot of ground to cover. But more importantly, if you guys are listening in, okay, this is very important. Take notes, because we're going to be, I know that me and Rebecca are going to be basically going through some very practical strategies. I know it's also going to be diving in and getting a better understanding of the data and the patterns that Rebecca has observed when working with some of the bigger companies that do thrive in a down market. So anyway, what's going to say, so as we mentioned, there's a lot of people that are worried over the next 12 months. Me included, actually. I'll be honest with you. I'm like, okay, I'm not sure where this is going to go, but how can we flip that fear into an advantage and start seeing the economy as a chance to pull away from everybody else and not just kind of cling on to this fear, if you like? Any thoughts?
Yeah, it's a very popular conference lexicon about, sizing uncertainty and the upside of turbulence. And we extol leaders to do so, but we don't really tend to give practical guidance of how, right? Besides just exciting and scaring. And it actually goes back to definitions, which I know sounds silly, but I'm an economist, so I like to define things. And what I've noticed about the word uncertainty, and I want you to watch out for this for me, Adam, is that when we talk to each other about uncertainty, we tend to put a word before it that means it's going to be bad. We ask each other in conversation, hey, how are you handling uncertainty? How is your team dealing with uncertainty? How are you feeling about the upcoming uncertainty? And without really meaning to, we're prefacing the word uncertainty with another word that frames our brain, this thing's going to be bad.
Yeah.
And that actually takes away from our growth mindset before we've even started. So if you think about the definition of uncertainty, simple but powerful, uncertainty means a series of future events which may or may not occur. Whether or not those events are good or bad depends on what we're trying to do and how we're set up. So I start there. It's merely a series of future events which may or may not occur. And whether or not those events are good or bad depends on what we're trying to do and how we're set up.
I think you make a really valid point, actually. And I guess it's kind of how we see change in a nutshell, really, isn't it? And because, human beings, we don't like change. Let's just be blunt, right? We don't like change. We don't like disruption. Investors, shareholders, whoever it is, they like certainty in the world. So I would absolutely agree with what you're saying. And I think it really kind of what it boils down to is a general belief system of how, whether it be an experience, whether it be positive or negative, and how we deal with uncertainty or the way the world is in a funny place kind of things. Anything else you want to add to that?
That framing is our starting point, right? And what you find is that when I ask, for instance, leaders to say, hey, what are the top 3 or 5 trends shaping your environment right now? You give me risks, right? We are very good at identifying what could go wrong. We are not trained to ask the question, what could go right? And that's part of the almost retraining you need to put into your brain if you want to lead a growth strategy through uncertainty, which is my premise, right? And your listeners are going to be very bored if that's what they don't want to do, because that's what we're really going to dive into. What does it take if you want to lead a growth journey through uncertainty?
It kind of reminds me of the research that Carol Dweck did on the growth and fixed mindset type of analogy, which you'll be very familiar with, of course, and certainly some of our listeners. And it kind of goes back to also that core foundation. We're all told to have a growth mindset, create a growth culture and stuff like that. But practically, when you are working in the trenches, sometimes it's not as easy to say something and put it into practicality. Do you know what I mean?
Theoretically, we all want to grasp onto it and we pride ourselves on doing it. Practically, it's very difficult to do, frankly, because of the training and grounding we have as leaders and managers in organizations takes us away from that growth mindset. So being inspired by a book or a workshop, and it's a fabulous book, I found in practice, Adam, very, very few leaders are actually able to build it organization-wide without basically adjusting everything. The culture, the processes, the systems, et cetera, right? You need to actually put this more holistic infrastructure in place, if you will, if you want to embed a growth mindset. And fundamentally, it starts by how do we view the world going forward?
Yeah. I think that's beautiful. Now, when you wrote Survive, Reset, and Thrive, and all of the years that you've worked with in strategy and lecturing at London Business School and working with these high growth companies, what did what were the blockages? What were the challenges? What were the patterns that you were seeing and that what they were experiencing? And again, going back to what we were talking about, but more importantly, what are the lessons did you take away in working with those specific companies?
So if we start at the highest level, is when facing uncertainty, I see three common responses from organizations, right? And the first is what I call delusion. And this is where usually an entrepreneurial leader tells me, Rebecca, I'm awesome in uncertainty. My team is great in downturns. Like bad times are great for us. And it's super passionate. But all this really means is they make a plan and they stick to the plan no matter what. That's not being great in a downturn. That's being delusional. The second thing, Adam, and you and I both have a lot of colleagues running businesses in the UK, is paralysis, where folks say, let's just wait. We saw this after Brexit. We saw this after COVID. We see this after every major election or every budget in the UK. Let's just wait. Let's just wait until we know more. And where paralysis gets really scary is not just the waiting, it's the loss of a growth muscle, right? Growth and performance is a muscle. And if you're constantly putting your organization into a couple of months holding pattern, it's like stopping to go to the gym for 6 months and expecting to go back the next morning and have a great workout, right? You've actually lost the muscle. So you're behind on an order of magnitude. And the third is what I call frenzy. And we're certainly seeing this right now. And frenzy happens when you're a little uncomfortable, stuff's not working. So you just throw stuff at the market and hope that something sticks, right? And if you think about delusion, paralysis, and frenzy, describe a lot of the market. And why uncertainty is sometimes a great time to grow, as I tell entrepreneurs, if you can just avoid falling into one of those three traps, you're already one step ahead. And those are the traps that I kept seeing companies fall into, and especially leaders. And then fundamentally, and this is going to sound theoretical, but we'll break it down, is growth is a loop, not a line. Like we love linear checklist, linear plans, and things we can just check through, get to step 10, and then we're awesome, right? And that's not what the real world is. You're constantly going through this loop. And I found reframing growth from a checklist, and we have thousands of leadership books on this checklist you need to do to lead a great company, to saying, no, the real world is a loop. You're going to go through this constant loop of survive, reset, thrive. You're going to have shocks in the market. You've got to stabilize. You need to reset for the real world, and then you can go back to thriving. But you're going to go back to survive as well, because there will be additional shocks and additional changes. And you've got to embrace this loop mentality and stop thinking that once we finish the checklist, we'll be in great growth mode forever. This loop is going to catch all of us, and that is okay. There's power in embracing this loop.
Yeah, that's a really interesting thought process. And I when you were talking about delusional, it reminded me of a conversation that I had with a very good friend of mine called Dr. John D. Martini. I don't know if you're familiar with his work, but
No.
he's completely magnificent. But he's read, if I'm not mistaken, something like 25,000 books on philosophy and wisdom and stuff like that. It's remarkable. But one of the things that he talked about was the vision. So what you're talking about at the beginning, which is the vision, and he said exactly the same word. Founders become, or business owners become, delusional.
Yeah.
And it kind of like correlates to what you're saying. And I love the fact that you mentioned around paralysis, because again, when I think about a down market or the world's in a funny place because I'm not sure which direction to shift. Right. I don't know. Or it might be because of my lack of experience. The best thing to do is then just to say, okay, well, I'm just going to sit here and ride the wave. But you made a very valid point and a great metaphor around going to the gym. How can you expect to have a best workout 6 months later? You're not going to be the same person. You're going to be completely out of shape. And I kind of have this, saying that if you're not growing, you're dying, right? Which is so true in what you're saying. Can you explain a little bit more about frenzy? Because when I think of the word frenzy, I think of the word panic. And I think of the word of, does that make sense? Could you give us some more context around frenzy?
So we're Think about even a holiday season, right? Where if you're in retail, you need to make most of your year, right? In the 6 weeks around the holiday season. And when you've got a cautious consumer, a margin pressured customer, a supply chain that's looking iffy, right? Where you have to, cost and continuity are big issues right now. You're doing a lot of feature tweaking, throwing stuff out at the market, trying to match competitor pricing. And we tend to lose strategic insight, right? We get so obsessed with just a couple operational metrics. We actually shut off the learning, right? We just want to achieve a couple of things. And this notion of what did I do? What do I need to do? It's great in a turnaround situation for a couple of weeks, but it misses a key point of like, what do I need to learn? What did I learn? Like, what's my insight about who my customer is and what my consumer is going through? And frenzy is where we just need to see something that we're actually not learning, right? We're just, again, throwing things at the market, whether it's features, benefits, pricing, or internally, we're mixing messages across our employees, or we're not telling them enough, right? Because we don't really know what that consistent message will be. And internal frenzy can manifest itself in external frenzy as well. And there's a reason for this, right? It sounds like we're blaming folks. It's difficult to plan in uncertainty. And frankly, Adam, I think that we should stop planning in uncertainty. And I know this sounds silly, but words matter. I'm asking, should we even call them strategic plans anymore? Right? Because there's something about the word plan that frames our brain. Everything in this must get done. And that's actually a dangerous place, because when things get a little bit off track because the situation's changed, we go into this frenzy mode of just trying desperately to get back on track, when perhaps we're on the wrong track. Given the changed situation, we should be doing something else instead. So strategy is absolutely critical in uncertainty. Strategic plans, that word plan might be framing our brain. I want to move out of planning mode into kind of what I call preparation mode, setting myself up to achieve, and regardless of where the market may take me.
Now, I want to pick up a valid point there, actually. Well, actually, I want to be thought-provoking here. You said rather than kind of planning to think that uncertainty may or may not come, let's park that to one side.
Yeah.
But then what would be then the argument of, okay, well, how can I do that if I want to go from, say, a reactive leader to a proactive leader? If I'm not doing that, surely that's going to keep me in reactive leadership. What's your thoughts about that?
Yeah, so we need to be acting, right? But acting what I call preparation mode, not planning mode. So you're shifting from planning to preparing. And in preparation mode, you're making decisions based on beliefs, not waiting for established facts. Now that sounds scary, because and again, this is a funny thing about our brains. When I say not making a decision based on established facts, brains usually go to, oh, she's telling us not to use data, but I thought data was critical in the world of AI. I didn't say not data, right? Data can inform our beliefs, but it's as simple as this, Adam. If every time your organization makes a decision, it's waited until there's an established fact in the market, there's no insight, right? Everybody has it. We need to move ahead and kind of make beliefs. And let's make this tangible. We was a big consumer goods company earlier this morning. How are consumers going to shift their shopping behavior in the upcoming holiday season? We know that consumers are moving from what we call SEO, where I go to Google and search something, to AEO, where I go to an ask engine like a ChatGPT and ask a question. I know big retailers in the US like Walmart are directly integrating ChatGPT into their ask engines. So I can make my shopping list, and then wonderfully, Walmart's going to take me directly there and I can buy directly in ChatGPT. Now, this is just one cycle away. What in a full strategy cycle when consumers are using agents to not only make their shopping list, but do their shopping for them? If your company relies on brand for consumer loyalty, and consumers of the future are going to outsource their shopping to agents who just do price featured trade-offs and don't have that brand loyalty, how do we start thinking about that? And so we start setting beliefs and testing beliefs. What are our beliefs on how quickly consumers are going to shift? What are our beliefs on agents' ability to build brand loyalty? What's our belief on able to pull brand loyalty before they move to agents? So these are just kind of one example, and that's a strategic conversation. What are our beliefs? Then I can start testing and making decisions based on those.
Yeah, I love that, because again, I'm just thinking about professions that are what I call more technically minded, what I call the left brain logistical people, right? Yeah. So they are what we call risk adverse people, and you will know many of them in some of the clients that you work with. And to them, from their perspective, is that, well, this sounds a bit like a gamble, a bit like going to the casino and stuff. How do we, as leaders, confidently identify high potential beliefs about where the market is going?
Yeah.
How can we then maybe make small tests or, small research or whatever it might be that can help us to then give us not necessarily the data or the small amount of confidence to then pull the trigger and say, okay, I've done my little test or I've done my bit of research. We can now move forward with this. Is there any feedback or any thoughts around that?
Yeah, it's a constant feedback loop. Now, companies and organizations and leaders are making decisions based on beliefs every day. They're just implicit beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
And part of my ask is those implicit beliefs that you're making supply chain vetting decisions on, you're making engineering decisions on, you're making resource allocation decisions on. Part of this is making those beliefs explicit so we can see as a leadership team, are we aligned on our beliefs? If we take, where tariffs are going for supply chain, I often say cost versus continuity. Like, yes, I might have to spend a lot more to buy something domestically, but maybe the continuity is more critical to me than cost. But are we aligned on some of those beliefs as a leadership team? So you're making something that was implicit explicit. Then as soon as you articulate a belief, some powerful things happen. One, at a highest level, Adam, once you articulate your strategic beliefs and you're saying, here's our 4 or 5 key beliefs. Given those beliefs, here's our strategic priorities. I now have permission to change. Right? As entrepreneurs, we tend to set strategy, communicate strategy, and then the situation changes and we're kind of stuck. Because we've just spent 3 to 4 months communicating the strategy to the team, and now we're thinking, oh, if we change something, the team's going to think we're flippant, we're being ad hoc. So we either end up not adjusting to where the growth is going in the market, or we adjust, we just don't communicate it. So the wider team was like, why is my boss's boss not working on any of those strategic priorities they communicated last month? And you're smiling, but we actually do this all the time. So in communicating beliefs, something super powerful happens. You have permission to change. But the second most powerful thing that happens is I've now recruited more testers. Because if I've shared to my distributed leaders, not just my top team, where my beliefs are, and this could be on the consumer, this could be inflation, consumer confidence, customer margin pressure, they're all now looking and testing that for me. And strategy execution is something we call parallel pathing, right? Where we're doing 2 things at once. I'm executing my strategy while I'm testing my beliefs. And as my beliefs are affirmed, then I'm going to resource my strategic priorities more. As my beliefs are not, I might be pulling back. And if my beliefs are disproven, I might be pausing a strategic priority. So it's not about set belief, go all in on a 3-year resource plan. I set belief, start incrementally resourcing while I'm actively testing in the market. This is the sweet spot. And my very left brain engineering kind of R&D folks can actually really get into this, and they actually really love it, because now I have 2 trackers, not just one. I have a strategy tracker that shows me how I'm executing to my priorities, but I also have a belief tracker, which is showing me my top 10 to 12 strategic beliefs. Are those still tracking in the market? Are we getting feedback that our beliefs are right? And we can actually put AI in the background to understand that. So we're moving again from making decisions only when we have an established fact to beliefs, but we're incrementally resourcing and testing and learning. That's the ultimate competitive advantage.
I really like that, because you're kind of looking at it from 2 angles, qualitatively and quantitatively.
Yes.
Because that's what kind of science and research is all about, really, having 2 different angles. From a lot of our listeners that do listen into the show are not your big corporations. They don't have what I call the available resources that maybe big corporates have. In terms of based on what you've just said, so some of our listeners are all in professional services, very what I call technicians in what they do, and very, very intelligent. What are some of maybe, I don't know, a practical exercise, or maybe you have a suggestion as to kind of say, okay, well, you don't need to do this, this, and this in terms of relevancy and in terms of where they're at. What would be some of the things that you do from a practical exercise? What would you get them to do in order to kind of help them achieve this?
So I start by breaking down trends, beliefs, and implications, because we confuse them in conversation, and most strategy processes do, and that hurts our ability to grow. So trends we're pretty good at identifying. We have lots of different frameworks, the classic ones, Michael Porter's 5 forces, the PEST framework, you name it, we've got something. The challenge with writing down a bunch of trends is, I call it, you're being a journalist, not a strategist, right? Anyone can write down a list of trends. Like there's no insight there. We're just saying what's happening in the world.
Right.
Strategy is your belief. Like, what's our stance, our declaration of how we believe this is going to move going forward? We're not predicting the future because we can't. We're just taking a stance. And then the implication is, so what? So even a team of 3, very small company I do this with, you can just take a flip chart and write the sentence: we are seeing X, comma, and we believe Y, comma, which means Z for us. And then take 5 or 6 top trends and build that out. The entrepreneurial trap is to go from trend to implication. Now, if I'm in the US, I am seeing tariffs, I must stockpile inventory.
Yep.
But what's our belief? Is our belief after the next 1 to 2 years we'll roughly end up where we were now? Is our belief kind of that it will reset these relationships? And that's where we actually start aligning on choices. So again, just build this very simple sentence. We are seeing X, comma, and we believe Y, comma, which means Z for us. And that's when you start thinking about what those possible implications are. And that's growth mindset. Because instead of saying, this is happening, we must protect ourselves, we're saying, this is a trend, here's how it could move. If we really took that belief, what would I do to grow? If that belief was really true, what would I lean into? And then the first step of strategy goes from what could go wrong to building out this huge opportunity set of all the changes in the market that we could take advantage of.
Are you planning to sell your business in the next 3 to 5 years? Then you already know it's not just about finding a buyer, it's about actually protecting what you've actually built. That's where our sponsor, Adam Benedict, comes in. They're one of the leading premier M&A legal firms trusted by founders to simplify complex exits, protect value, and deliver results. And if you want a smart, smoother, and strategic exit, visit adambenedict.co.uk. Yeah. I don't know about you, but I feel like sometimes, we're talking about mindset and belief system, but I also believe that it's about managing risk in the right way. But what you're also saying is, okay, well, yes, you've got data and stuff, but you've also got intuition, because that's what you're really kind of talking about is like, I need to now start listening to my gut and think, okay, well, I can't just go with building a strategy based on my gut instincts. I need to then have my trends and vice versa. They work in coincide with each other. Does that make sense? And
discussing and debating these beliefs, not just with your colleagues, but your partners, your customers, testing them in the market, putting feelers out there, right? I call these the kickers and killers, right? We are amazingly good at identifying killers, the top 10 things that could break your business model. We actually really struggle to identify the kickers, those possible upside opportunities. Every trend has kickers and killers. And so this is a great thought exercise I like to do with the team, is because if I ask you, a team, Adam, to sit down and say, hey, give me 10 killers, they can do it in less than 5 minutes, regardless of the industry. If I say, give me 10 kickers, 10 things that would fundamentally change the business model for the upside, I have to give them feelers. I have to check in on them. I have to basically counsel them. Like it's crazy, right? And especially if you say you can't use a GPT yet, just start from your brains. And this is an amazing exercise, but hey, let's look at most strategies. For our larger companies, when you present a strategy to the board, what's Appendix 1? The risk register. Why isn't there Appendix 2, the opportunity register, which says, hey, here's all of the other growth opportunities we did not prioritize, but hey, just calling out that we identified them. Less than 1% of strategies have an opportunity register, 98% have a risk register. And that again goes to why we don't have more growth mindsets in organizations.
Yeah. I love that exercise, the killers and the kickers. I actually wrote that down as part of the end of the conversation.
There's your homework for you tonight, Adam.
But that's a good one. I like that. So for you guys that are listening in, by the way, that was a pure masterclass. Killers and kickers, right? 10 of each. Email it in. Okay. We want to see those lists. I think that's a great one. I love it. What was going to say now, if I'm, say, a business owner that's running a $3 to $10 million, business, consultancy, whatever it is, and I'm feeling the squeeze a little bit, or I'm feeling the pressure, what's the one thing? Now, we talked about belief systems, which I absolutely think that this would definitely come in, but what would you get me to do in the next 30 days that will kind of help me to, I suppose, steady the ship a little bit without kind of pre-anticipating that I'm just going to kill the growth of my company?
Yeah. Well, we need to separate. So I'm going to give you two answers depending on where our company is. If the company is in what I would call survive phase, so there has been a shock, which maybe you lost your major customer account, or maybe kind of if you're professional services, you lost one of your partners. So now you have less kind of folks to kind of go to the market with. If there is a shock, it could be an external shock. So maybe kind of a new regulation really affected your business. You need to do a pause in survive mode. And in survive mode, we have the basics, which are the basics. And I call them the 4 C's for cash, cost, customer, communication. So what cash flow do I need? Now, Adam, if you and I are a AI company based in Silicon Valley, you should have 24 months of cash flow. If you and I are a construction company based in the North in the UK, 3 months of cash flow is great, right? So again, there's not like there's one number of cash flow that's steady across all businesses, but you need to decide for your team, what's our minimum cash flow? What about cost? How can I get my fixed cost as low as possible so my costs scale with my growth, not without it? Customers. How strong are my customer relationships? How strong is my customer retention? Do I have at-risk customer accounts? And communication. The minute you know as a leader that there is a shock to the system, your talent knows too, right? And we need to make sure we have clear communication lines. One of the biggest faults companies have in survive mode is they stop communicating because they don't know the perfect thing to say. Well, lack of communication is the wrong communication, right? If you don't tell the story, your employees will make one up, and theirs is usually worse, right, than the actual reality. So just sitting down and going through your 4 C's. But the 4 C's are not strategy. And I always say, they're the basics. Everyone has this playbook. I'm not saying anything your listeners don't already know. We need to then move out of survive mode by going into fast learning mode, really leaning into our employees and building deep moats around our customers. So again, if I'm in shock, my 4 C's. Now, if I'm just wondering, how am I going to grow in this environment? I'm feeling a little uncertain or unsteady, as we've been discussing. Then I go to, well, what is your right to win? What's your competitive advantage? Out of all the questions we ask in growth, I found we've gotten the laziest on this one. What we tend to do is say, hey, like, this is what I want to do, and here's why I'm really great at doing that. Like, we talk about competitive advantage after we've made choices in a way just to justify those choices with tactical actions. Now, in business schools, we spend about 6 months on this coursework. I don't expect anyone to have time for that. So for people who actually have to run businesses and don't have time to read 600 books, here's what a right to win is. It's only one of 3 things. You've got stuff other companies don't. You can do stuff other companies can't, or you can build moats around your advantage. And that's what your team should sit around, whether you're a team of 2 or 10. What do we have that other companies don't? What can we do that other companies can't? And how can we build moats around our advantage? And moats just mean once we have a customer, client, consumer advantage, I think we've dug these deep moats around them so they stay with us. That is the ultimate strategy question. The answer might be we don't have a right to win, but then that's your job. Figure out how to build one.
Yeah, I love that. I think you made a real. I love the fact that you've distinguished two scenarios, because they are like 2 scenarios, and the fact that you've like put this into a framework where people can distinguish where they are, which bucket do you sit in, ladies and gentlemen, and then which then you need to then execute in, because strategy to me can be very confusing because, hey, strategy is a little bit like leadership or marketing, right? You know, read one book and you'll read 20 other books and they all have different versions, different opinions and different contexts. But I do like the fact, I do love a framework, by the way, and I do love the fact that you can easily, what I was going to say to you, simplify.
We're trying to. Yeah. You can be simple without being simplistic. Yeah.
Absolutely. 100%. So I love that. So very good. Here's my thought, right? So off the back of this, so a shaky economy, or should we say world being in a funny place, whichever version you want to see as, is generally not particularly great for team morale. And generally has a knock-on effect to the founder, whether it be burnout, analysis by paralysis, and also, which you might have seen, but it also can enable good people to then jump ship because they've seen a better opportunity, right? Now, you obviously need motivated, nimble, adaptable
Mhm.
people. Now, kind of, and that's kind of, you need that to
Yeah.
run, survive, reset, and thrive, right? As
Mhm.
based on your book.
Yeah.
Now, from a leadership perspective, what's the number one way you'd hold on to really positive energy?
Yeah.
And how do you make sure that all of the team that is
Yeah.
not, they're not seeing it as a threat, and they're just like, this is part of their everyday job, you know, because culture is extremely important. This is something that we
It
probably
is.
haven't spoken about so far, but what are some of the tips or advice that you have for that?
What if I told you, and empirically it's true, I'm going to say that before I start, that
Okay.
periods of uncertainty or shakiness or caution are actually the best time to grow a company. Not an
Uh-huh.
okay time, not a bad time, the best time to grow. And again, this is empirically true. And let me break down why. Is one reason uncertainty is a great time to grow is the majority of your competitors are stuck in delusion, paralysis, or chaos, right? If you can avoid those three traps we've spoken about, you're one step ahead. The second reason it's a great time to grow is some things don't change. We become very obsessed as entrepreneurs for what's changed, what's new, whether it's AI, whether it's geopolitical policy, whether it's, whatever it is. Some things don't change. And this is something Amazon does in its strategy sessions I really like. After they talk about the new trends, they always end the session with, what's our anchor? What are those foundation points that we believe won't change over the next year? And one thing that hasn't changed, Adam, is the definition of what strategy is, right? I love a definition that's lasting. So strategy is about creating value. Value creation is about driving the biggest gap possible between our customer consumer willingness to pay and our total cost of delivering that value. So if you think about your job in growing, or a growth strategy is creating value, and value creation is just driving a gap between customer consumer willingness to pay and your total cost of delivering it. All you're trying to move is move those two needles apart. Now, how we do that changes in uncertainty, but the definition doesn't. And if you allow me, the third reason why it's a great time to grow, and frankly the most powerful, is this. When uncertainty is high, something else gets high too, and that's honesty. When times are
Mm.
uncertain, customers, consumers, partners, and by the way, employees are much more honest about what they really need in a value proposition and what's a mere feature. They're much more honest about a relationship means to them and what it isn't. They're actually less willing to try new things that don't have proven value because they want kind of their spending power to go for things they know that will deliver value. So if you take the premise, which I do, that learning velocity is the ultimate differentiator, and organizations that learn faster are organizations that grow faster, then uncertainty is an amazing time to grow because all of those feedback loops are never tighter and more powerful than they are in times like now when uncertainty is high.
I think you make a really valid point there, and I can totally relate to that. The other thought that I had in my mind though was, if you've got a small business owner that doesn't have a big team of consultants,
Mhm.
or, especially with the big corporations and whatever it is, like, how does that loop thinking feedback loop, how
Mhm.
can you implement that? Where can we receive it from when they're all making decisions on a daily basis, firefighting and so forth, etc., where can we seek that
Yeah.
counsel?
So in the firefighting mode, right, we might still be in survive mode. And if so, we need to get our 4 C's in place.
Yeah.
Is think about that weekly huddle, even if it's a team of 4 or 5. What did we do
Mhm.
last week? What do we need to do this week? I add 2 lines. What did we learn last week? What do we need to learn this week? Do we need to learn, for instance, how consumers are feeling coming into the holiday period? Do we need to learn how our supply chain partners are pausing or waiting, right, until a tariff thing has come out? Do we need to learn how our employees, right, are feeling about a new AI initiative that we're rolling out? Like focusing on what we need to learn. And then, Adam, it can be adding 1 or 2 questions to a customer conversation. It can be about kind of adding kind of a very quick survey that we send to all of our salespeople on a Friday in a mobile app that pops up. Why I love having this conversation is even 3 years ago, there were a lot of things out of reach for small teams because they were just too expensive, or you would really need one person just working on them. What AI tools have done, and there's many faults and downsides, et cetera, but the ability of using AI tools to increase learning velocity is just so exciting to me. You can now build AI prompts to test 3 or 4 beliefs and give you automatic feeds as an individual with a $20 or kind of 18 pound a month solution. So what do I need to learn? Is it a couple of questions to a customer conversation? Is it setting an AI alert? Is it frankly even setting a Google alert still for some of these aspects? But just being able to have the conversation of what I need to learn and then go test things in the market. That's why uncertainty is so great, because we're going to learn so much, because honesty is highest when uncertainty is high as well.
This episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. Psst, healthcare pros, word's out, and it's too good to keep quiet. Look, LinkedIn is revolutionizing job hunting, making it possible to search by specialty, shift preference, and salary. Endless scrolling is out. Whether it's a mental health therapist or dental hygienist, finding the perfect role is faster and easier than ever. Head to linkedin.com/healthcare and start your search today.
Hey guys, me again. And I just want to remind you about the Exit Readiness Assessment, the most amazing tool for CEOs and founders that are looking to build a self-managing company. This will help you to identify what's blocking you from helping you to step out your business operations and effectively scale up and eventually exit over the next 12 to 36 months. It gives you a personalized report and you can complete it in less than 4 minutes. All you have to do is head over to readytoexit.scoreapp.com. That's readytoexit.scoreapp.com to get your personalized score. Enjoy. I think you made a really great tip there. Weekly huddles, ladies and gents, especially if you run in a small team and stuff, because hey, you don't need to have a big team of strategy consultants like us. You just have a small team, then do your weekly huddles, and I think that's kind of what keeps the glue together, right?
Exactly.
That's what keeps the ship sailing. You've got to be all singing off the same hymn notes, I like to call it. So that's a great one. I like that.
Called aligned speed, right? Alignment. Because look, here's the thing. Speed is a competitive advantage, but entrepreneurs sometimes lose the alignment part. They think speed, speed, speed. Well, speed without alignment is chaos, right? But alignment without speed is too slow to matter. So your real competitive advantage is aligned speed. And even teams of 3 or 4 can lose the alignment quite quickly if they're not aligned on their beliefs, if they're not aligned on their right to win, if they're not aligned on what they're trying to learn. But again, aligned speed, that's what these weekly huddles should be aiming to achieve for us.
Yep. Love that. Aligned speed. That's a good one. It's a very good one.
Feel away.
Now, I want to kind of, and I know we're kind of coming towards the end of our Q&A section, but I wanted to ask you around, you talked about kickers earlier on, which I absolutely loved. And you set the challenge for the kickers, the
kickers and
killers. But I wanted to ask you, like, from your perspective about opportunity in terms of like from a Thrive perspective, like where are those biggest opportunities? Like, could it be a specific industry, or is it that there needs to be, or do you feel like actually it's just a strategic shift that you're seeing could be the real Thrive market? From your perspective, what do you think that is?
Yeah, I'm industry agnostic in the clients that I work with. I'm industry agnostic, which just means, not partial to one, where I see growth opportunities right now. Naming an industry, I will say 2 or 3 things that I'm super excited about there, right? And that's the exciting thing about reframing uncertainty to just differences that are happening, right? Is, commodity goods, like, okay, well, this is, these are a low growth area. Well, maybe not the same fast growth as technology, but, how can I lean in and offer a different value proposition to my customers that isn't around price? What do my new customers want? As things change, my customer changes inside companies. Do they want real-time data? Do they want apps? Or actually just picking up the phone and having a conversation? Does that still matter? Do we know what a value proposition is to our customers? So I get really obsessed, Adam, with that notion of the job to be done, the old Christensen framework, which is so, so powerful. What is the job our customers or consumers hire us to do? And really leaning into that. And that gives me my growth insights. And the reason that jobs to be done is getting more powerful than ever is AI can start to take away things that you have that others don't. And AI can start to compute away things that you can do that others can't. AI and Gen AI and agents have not yet attacked that. When your company, whether you're a team of 3 or 300, delivers a very compelling job to be done, which means you're doing something for customers that's valuable to them. And the thought of them not getting that offering is so painful. Like the friction of not getting that is so high, they won't even look at alternatives. Then we start building these moats. So, long answer that sounds theoretical, but the punchline is I see really promising growth opportunities in every industry right now if I'm willing to reframe some of my classic where to play questions. Am I willing to find a new set of customers or consumers? Am I willing to challenge traditional value propositions? Am I willing to think about, hey, maybe we've always gone to market in this way, but actually the buyers are changing and we need to go to market in this new way? So some of our classic strategy questions are same questions, but how we think about them needs to change in a changing world.
It's a really interesting thought that came up because one thing that I have observed, especially as baby boomers drive today's wealth, as we know, and some of them have been in business for like 30 plus years, right?
40,
and they,
yeah,
which are great businesses. However, they have also been, a lot of the conversations that I've had is they've been sitting there for way too long and they still have this mindset of, that's how we've done things around here. This is how, and the thing is that what I call businesses that are what we call new age thinking.
Yeah.
Right. So it's businesses that are kind of seeing all these opportunities like that you're mentioning, but actually there's such a larger majority of baby boomer based businesses that are still stuck in their old ways. Is there any advice that you have for those businesses?
One is the reframe, right? Is we need to challenge that way of thinking. So I start with my right to win, right? What is my right to win going forward? And then I like to open the box of what I call the where to play questions, or my who, what, how. Who is this business best suited for? What is our differentiated value proposition? And how are we going to reach those customers? And where a lot of these baby boomer businesses struggle is if you say, well, who's your ideal customer? They tell me, that's a silly question, Rebecca. My customers are the ones that pay me. It's like, no, right? Who's your ideal customer? And I love this thought exercise, Adam. And I'm doing this with a lot of baby boomers right now. Say, if you could close the company today, and I'm going to fire all of your customers, like they're all gone. And we're going to open the company tomorrow, and you can hire back the customers you want. You get the benefit of all of your learnings, but none of the baggage. Like, what would you do? Right. And that, like, I love that question of if I could take all of the learnings, like I don't lose any of the learnings, but I have none of the baggage. What customers would I want to work with? Who are truly my ideal customers? And those are the ones that we resource, customize, and serve. Because the opposite of ideal is not fire, right? We're going to have some non-ideal customers. If I'm a consumer goods company, I have a lot of non-ideals. If I'm professional services, I should probably only have ideals. But my ideal customers are those I resource, customize, and serve. And empower your team to think about who those ICPs or ideal customer personas are. That's one of the best ways to figure out where growth is happening in your industry.
I love that. I love that question. I think I'm going to implement that into myself. And I also believe that when we think of the word ICP, it's very what we call touching on the surface. So a lot of it's demographics and they describe the characteristics, but not necessarily psychological and emotional drivers.
The emotive breakdowns are the most powerful in your ICP. Now, and I do this I'm working with right now, last week I was with cosmetics, with foundries, with manufacturing, with insurance and banking, all having ICP conversations. And I like to ask the question with engineers, always give me a look, but I'm going to ask it anyway. I say, well, what's your ICP's ideal emotion? When he or she is leaving work for the end of the day, what's their ideal emotion? Is it stress-free or is it full of stress? Some people love stress, right? Is it in control or is it peace of mind? Are they thinking about work or are they not thinking about work? And frankly, do you know? Because if you don't know, I'm probably lacking some growth insights. And then growth is about what's your company's job in getting them to their ideal emotion, right? That's the kind of questions I love exploring with my ICP.
And is it based on fact or assumption?
It might be based on our assumption, which then I need to test. I need to spend time with them. I need to observe them. I need to talk to them, right? But then really understanding that, again, that's going to unlock some of those insights. And often it's little tweaks in how we serve our customers or go to market that make the big difference. The most dramatic kind of growth stories are often not from these very sexy pivots. I was doing A and now I'm going to do B. It's about really understanding these insights and then tweaking the business model to serve those customers better.
I love it. I think this is great. And for you guys that are listening in, by the way, like what Rebecca's really given you is an absolute masterclass, because in fact, I didn't really know what to expect from today's conversation, ladies and gents, by the way, but I didn't expect it to go as deep as we are going, because we are going through a lot of deep stuff, but actually they're very thought-provoking questions that, from my perspective, are things that we need to ask of ourselves that really kind of helps us to move the needle more than anything. I want to kind of move into one of my favorite parts of our conversation, which is what I call the coaching mode, right? So now for you guys that are listening in and your regular listeners, you'll know how this works. We bring in a guest and then they end up coaching me, which is a great thing. I get to experience a bit of coaching from her. But ultimately, one thing that I want you to think about is I want you to imagine that Rebecca is sitting with you on the sofa right now, and she's asking you exactly the same questions. Because ultimately, again, this podcast is for you guys. Like, this is not for our benefit. This is great for conversations. But more importantly, I want you to go away with some practical strategies about how to go from that, what we call survive to thrive type of mentalities. Where should we start?
Well, Adam, we're approaching the end of the year, right? And so the first thing you should probably do is assess your 2025. But I want to change those questions because actually we're not always great at assessing. And the 3 questions I ask at the end of a year or the end of a strategy are, did I get it right? Did I choose it right? Did I do it right? Right? Because most teams and individuals are frankly better in some. So did I get it right? Did I call the situation correctly? Did I identify kind of the right opportunities? Were my beliefs correct? Did I get the situation right? Did I choose it right? Like, did I choose the right priorities? Did I decide to work on the right things? Did I scope them clearly enough to do them? And did I do it right? Did I execute well? With my chosen priorities, did I resource them? Did I give them the time, treasure, and talent they needed? So my favorite end of the year assessment is, did I get it right? Did I choose it right? Did I do it right? And then we've got to go into next year. And the first thing you're going to do for me is you're going to set your beliefs. Again, think I am seeing X and I believe Y, which means Z for me. What are those top couple of beliefs and possible implications? Then you're going to go into your right to win. What do you have that others don't? And what can you do that others can't? And how can you build moats? Then you're going to think about how your where to play needs to change. Who are your ideal customers next year? What differentiated value proposition are you going to deliver? And you need to change how you go to market. And then only once you've answered those 3 questions on beliefs, right to win, and where to play, are you going to set the goal for next year. This is the biggest mistake people make in strategies. They get in a room and the first question they ask is, what should we do? That is the last question you ask in a growth strategy, because we got to bring the insights in. So you're going to do your beliefs, your right to win, and where to play. And then and only then are you going to set the goals.
Excellent. Love that. And I feel like, and again, this is just a general observation from my perspective, especially with a lot of conversations that I've had with a lot of founders and business owners, is that they're too late to what I call prepare ahead, because they're so in the, what I call the present time. So you'll know this, working with a lot of CEOs of the big Fortune 500 companies, all of the CEOs are what I call future thinking. They're putting themselves in the future. But obviously for the smaller business owners, I find that their behaviors are very different from, because they don't have the big teams and whatever it is. What would you like? I mean, and again, I don't know if this is a belief system where what I believe, I think it probably is, but I used to feel like, it's a bit like setting a New Year's resolution, right? I need to then do my strategy because I feel like I have to, but then how do I get ahead? Like, how do I stay, say 6 months ahead? Because it's best to plan ahead rather than kind of, staying within the present time. Have you got any advice for me?
It's going to sound cliche, but you've got to slow down to speed up, right? We are so concerned about where we are that we actually don't have time to focus on where we need to be. You need to give yourself, and if you have a team, your team explicit permission to pause. Because building any sort of growth capability that's going to lead this breakthrough growth, you have to slow down to speed up. You've got to assess your beliefs and right to win. You often need to change your where to play. And only then can you set the goals that will truly move the needle. So giving yourself explicit permission to do so is one of the most critical steps.
I like that. That's a good stuff. That's really good. I like that. Slow down to speed up.
Yeah.
And again, I feel like, again, it depends on how we're wired, but I always felt like speed was your ultimate advantage. But then over the years, I've come to understand that actually patience is also a competitive advantage. I don't know how you'd feel about that, but do you think that that is the case?
If it's purposeful, yeah. In strategy, we often get, this bias for action is, if I think about, there's hundreds of just classic leadership slogans we've been throwing out for years that actually don't work. Right? And action is awesome if it's based on beliefs, based on learning, being tested, being vetted, and like driving towards a clear definition of success. Purposeful waiting can be a very great capability. If I'm purposely waiting to learn in the market, to observe someone else's action, or to build capability, that's awesome. If I'm waiting out of fear or paralysis or anxiety and I'm not learning, that's not. So we need to really distinguish between different types of waiting. But waiting, right, to build capability or waiting for learning are great stances to be in.
Love that. Some good stuff. Now, I know that we're kind of coming towards the end of our conversation. I think we could talk about this for hours, actually, because I think there's so many different avenues and different directions that we could take this conversation. But just for context, you've got a best-selling book out. You're a lecturer at London School of Business. You've got huge credibility. What are you hoping to, with the work that you're doing right now, what impact are you hoping to make? Like, what's the future look like for you, and what are you working on?
So I don't know where I got this obsession, but I've been obsessed with how to grow companies for a very long time, right? And that is, I do what I do every single day. I am the luckiest person in the world. I get to do what I love in a way that I love, right? And I get to learn every day. And you and I've talked about this as one of the best things about our job. So I loved writing the book because it forced me to crystallize some thinking, but it also spread that thinking into a wider set of hands, right, than I could individually work with. And having the book out and having conversations about it allows me to have some of those conversations. So I'm just looking to drive an impact on value creation, and more folks feel empowered, right, to move and grow through uncertainty rather than paralyzed by fear that it could be something bad.
Yeah, I think you make a really valid argument, and I loved our conversations today because, again, it's kind of out the box thinking. From what we tend to think about when certain words come up, and how we often relate to certain circumstances, which is what you've highlighted today.
Yeah.
So I want to say thank you for that. I really greatly appreciate that. And just want to say it's been a great jam. I've
enjoyed it. Thank you. Yeah.
It's been really good, isn't it? But all of her social media links and a link to her book is going to be below. So you can go and purchase that in Barnes & Noble, Waterstones, whatever your favorite bookstore, whatever it is. I would highly recommend that you go check that out. And, she's got some great endorsements as well, which is got huge weight and gravitas to it. So Rebecca, I just want to say thank you so much for being on today's show. It's been a great jam.
Thank you so much for having me, Adam.
You're very welcome. And for you guys that are listening in, if it's the first time or you're a regular listeners, welcome back. And first time guys, make sure that you hit that subscribe and follow button if you're listening to YouTube, Apple, Spotify, wherever you are listening in the world. Hopefully we'll see you again back here on The Business Strategist. And from me and Rebecca, hope you have a great day. See you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.
The holidays mean more travel, more shopping, more time online, and more personal info in more places that could expose you more to identity theft. But LifeLock monitors millions of data points per second. If your identity is stolen, our U.S.-based restoration specialists will fix it, guaranteed, or your money back. Don't face drained accounts, fraudulent loans, or financial losses alone. Get more holiday fun and less holiday worry with LifeLock. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit LifeLock.com/podcast. Terms apply.